Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, where we bring you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation every week. Featuring expert consultants and small business owners who have found success but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their firsthand experience. Now, let's get down to business on Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Business Banking at Jovia Financial Credit Union, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, CEO, keeper of the brand, marketing, and digital agency.
We're focused on being the premier resource for business and entrepreneurship. We bring you weekly business advice, tips, tools, and services that help you grow your business. Plus, we interview some of the top business leaders in the industry.
And very excited because helping provide us with business empowerment today is a leader in the nonprofit sector. His name is Adam Rabinovitch, and he is the executive director of COPE. Now, COPE is a nonprofit that is helping parents and families deal with the loss of a child, and I can't think of a mission that's more important. So thank you, Adam. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
And thank you, Ray and DB Donyshia, for welcoming me to Tower Talk on behalf of the many families that count on COPE support. So really appreciate being here.
Fantastic. And so, Adam, we're looking forward to hearing more about COPE and its mission. Can you share with us and our listeners?
Absolutely. So we're talking in March of 2023 for the audience who may be listening after the fact. And COPE is in its 24th year of supporting Long Island families and more around grief, loss, and healing. As Ray stated so beautifully, our mission is to support parents, siblings, and families living with the loss of a child. And I know we'll talk more about how we do that and how people can connect with us as we go through the conversation today.
Now, how did you become involved with COPE?
Yeah, great question. So I joined the organization as the executive director just about 5 years ago. And it's only since I've been part of the COPE network and working with my colleagues and the families that we support that I realized that my family is in the same club that no one wants to belong to, which is this community living with the loss of a child and living with the loss of a loved one. And so my family's journey goes back 40 plus years to Westchester County, not quite Nassau or Suffolk. And we're living with the loss of my kid sister from back then. Didn't talk much about her throughout my life and my parents and brother and sister who didn't get to know Marnit, my sister. So it's been personally rewarding and meaningful to get to connect with so many other families like my own and help support them.
Now, COPE is also an acronym. What does COPE stand for?
You got it. So the acronym that our visionary founder, Lily, Julian, and many others refer to is Connecting Our Paths Eternally. And that has, I know, different meanings for different people. We're a non-denominational, welcoming to all backgrounds. So it has little to do with any particular religion and a lot to do with the way that we connect with our loved ones, past and present.
And your mission, your mission is very specific. You're a nonprofit. How does COPE differentiate its approach from other nonprofits?
Yeah, that's what we and I wake up every day figuring out what's our unique value, and we're also running a business, a nonprofit corporation. So one of the things that really makes COPE special, and part of the proof is the fact that we're here almost a quarter of a century in, and still sustaining, is that we have an incredible level of commitment and so-called buy-in from the families that have counted on us over the last 24 years. Those that count on us today, and inevitably those that will need us tomorrow. I keep hearing from lots of the stakeholders, lots of the parents and siblings and families that have come through COPE's doors, that for them, in many cases in their own so-called grief journey, the next level of their own healing is helping others. So people really step up and step in and give back through COPE to other families in this club that no one wants to belong to. However, we're all connected. So I'll talk more. I hope I'll have a chance to talk more about how people can connect to the organization and give back, whether they're in this club or they care about others in their lives who are grieving the loss of a loved one.
Absolutely. And so, Adam, what services do you provide at COPE?
Yeah, we have three critical, I'll call them the beating hearts of how we support families, and then can answer any clarifying questions and certainly let people who are listening know how they can join our programs. Almost every day of the week throughout the year, we offer clinically facilitated peer support groups. So these are happening across Long Island and beyond. They're happening both in person in community spaces and online. So we're providing full accessibility. And these are really three types today. So we have parent support groups where parents living with the loss of their children come together with a professional facilitator, a social worker or psychologist in the room with them to facilitate, not provide direct therapy, but really to help the group move through its shared communal grief. We also have those peer support groups for bereaved siblings, older siblings living with the loss of a brother or sister. And we proudly offer a teen support group for older teens, 17 to 22, who are living with the loss of a loved one. So the peer support groups are a critical part of what we offer. They're free to join. They're open-ended, so people can drop in, drop out as they move through their grief journey, and we continue to be there. A second program that we offer are a diverse variety of healing workshops. These are open to everyone and anyone. Many of them are online. We also, and I know we'll talk about community partnerships. We work closely with the Long Island-based Pine Lawn Memorial and Arboretum to offer monthly healing workshops, including mindfulness and art therapy and music therapy, really providing anyone who's grieving and those who care about those who are grieving the tools to help support them. And the third area that we're proud of is our 12th summer of hosting what's called Camp Erin, ERIN NYC. And this is a bereavement camp for kids age 7 to 17, free of charge. It's a 3-day bereavement and camp experience. And we also have a concurrent caregiver retreat. So it's really wraparound support for families. So we have our peer support groups, our healing workshops, and our Camp Erin NYC and retreat. And then we have resources that we can always provide people as they come to us in need. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and so dealing with grief it's just a very hard and hitting topic. And so how do you see a lot of people that come through, I'm sure, your doors. How do you help them through this time?
Yeah, you hit it on the head, DB. The aspect of this club that no one wants to belong to is what keeps me and so many other people from being too much in despair and recognizing that the COPE Corporation, this nonprofit corporation going into its second quarter century of impact, has become a place where people can come together, connect, avoid isolation, which is something, and I'm sure we'll talk about the last few years of the pandemic and social isolation. So grief can be such an isolating experience that I know I can wake up every day and that COPE is providing that safe, shared community for people who don't want to be here necessarily, but the fact is that we exist and continue to exist for those that will inevitably need us tomorrow, the day after, and the day after. So that's what keeps me connected, inspired, and motivated.
Now, despite it being such heartbreak that you're dealing with so much, you and the folks that I've had the pleasure of meeting through COPE have been amazing. And I want to give a shout out to a mutual friend of ours, Scott Haber, for introducing us. Wonderful gentleman, also a competitor of mine, but friendly competitor. Love Scott. Very grateful to him for introducing us. Tell us about the folks like Scott and your extended network and your staff and the folks who help you do what you do every day.
Yeah, it's absolutely a team effort. So Scott is a volunteer board member. Our amazing team of clinicians and camp directors and administrators and everyone who helps keep the corporation impactful and sustaining have a connection to the mission and the work we do. So many of our board members and volunteers, and certainly some of our staff as well, are in this club. So we have people who are involved very much because they were brought to the work through their own grief and through their own loss, and they stay connected because COPE has supported and helped them, and they inevitably want to give back and do that in a variety of ways. So as a professional operation with a staff of 17 and growing and a board of 13 and growing, that's part of the engine that keeps Cope in business every day and helping families. And we count on the partnerships of everyone from banks like Jovia and others and our sponsors and donors and corporations who invest in Cope so that we can continue to be there for the families that need us.
You are listening to Tara Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, and our guest today is Adam Rabinovitch, the Executive Director of Cope. What are some of the common misconceptions about your organization?
Yeah, that's something that we deal with, and one of the things that my colleagues and I and others working in this field are actively involved in is trying to take away some of the stigma around grief. So a misconception that Cope would fall under the umbrella of, and I think it's more broad than that, at least in our culture and our society in the States and in New York, is that grief is something, and this is something that I always had assumed, that grief can be something that one, quote, gets over. Whereas the reality, and this is what science and data and anecdotes and the testimonials from the families that we support tell us, is that grief is not something that one gets over. It's something that one moves through, something that becomes integrated in one's life. Another thing that really stuck out to me that I've heard in a variety of ways from colleagues and families who come to us is that grief and the loss of a loved one is really the flip side of the love that we have for them. So grief can be a reminder, and we provide the tools so that someone can get out of bed, brush their teeth, move through the world, and find a new chapter in their life without getting over grief, but again, integrating it into their journey.
And then we're sure you come in contact with people from all walks of life. Can you share a story of how you helped a family cope or a person in need?
Yes. So we have at least 3,000 stories and counting because, as I mentioned earlier, we keep getting intakes and requests for support every day, including early this morning. So one that's struck me and stuck out just in the last 6 months or so came after our most recent Camp Erin and parent caregiver retreat, where a few children living with the loss of their father, plus the mother, all came to our program, all sharing a common loss and yet grieving in their own ways, because grief is also an individual journey. And then after that, we heard from mom that, yes, the experience was bittersweet, but for the first time in their family's grief journey, the shared journey, something wasn't. And they had a different feeling in each of their hearts. This is the kids, this is mom. They shared something special, they said. And the kids were feeling calmer, more grounded, mom as well. And they had a new shared language as well that they could use and carry forward in their family to share about the loss of their loved one. So that's a reminder that while grief is an individual experience, it really impacts a full family. And there's some interesting and somewhat compelling and depressing data that for every loss, there's 9 people who are bereaved. So whether we're talking about COVID or the fentanyl crisis, every time that a family loses a loved one, at least 9 people are in direct bereavement. And that is a public health crisis in addition to being a personal grief crisis.
I imagine that there's a lot of guilt, like survival guilt that folks have. And I'll use myself as an example. We have a very close family member who was 8 years old and had passed away, unfortunately, from a brain tumor. I'll go into it. It's short. I'll make the story short, but basically the surgeon that worked with her, I went through cancer treatment, and he was one of the ones who saved my life. And during that process, obviously, not obviously, but it was within a year that she had passed away, and I was diagnosed, or maybe a year and a half or so. And I went through that thought process of, I was nearly 50 years old. Why her, not me? And it truly was, if I could trade places with her, I would, because to me, it just seems so unfair. And that thought always haunted me throughout my treatment and even after. And I slowly started to realize afterwards that the guilt that I was feeling, that was legitimate, feeling, but it was something that I could turn around and do something positive with. So we have a picture of her that we have displayed always. She's always on our mind. Like you said, the grief doesn't go away. And I do something positive. I walk for her in the Leukemia Lymphoma Society walk, Light the Night, every year, and I do so in remembrance of her. Certainly I'm a survivor, but, my main reason for doing it is her. So I'm sure, that there are situations that you've dealt with helping folks with that kind of guilt. If you want to share with us a story about someone who's going through that, we'd love to hear that.
Well, thank you, Ray, for sharing that story and all the work that you're doing, giving back. And I just wanted to call out or remind folks of any kind of loss that no one needs to grieve alone. So as Ray was just saying, reaching out to whether it's COPE or another trusted source in your community, that reaching out is really critical, and our vision is that no one has to grieve alone. And so the families that are coming to us again almost every day of the week, looking for support, looking for a lifeline in many ways, whatever the reason is that they are grieving, whether it's a loss of a vehicular accident, or again the fentanyl crisis, which is taking way too many lives of too many, especially young ones, across Long Island and beyond. We're seeing again and again that there are these unique stories, but the common theme. So by having safe spaces where people can share, and in our case with COPE, have that professional, trained, seasoned facilitator there to guide them through, just helps them remind that no one needs to be alone in their grief. So while there's too many stories to pick one to share this morning, I just want your audience to know that there's support out there for them and for their loved ones. And it may be a tough first step to reach out, but we hear again and again that that's the step that helps people move into the next phase of their healing.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you both for sharing. You're dealing with people that are going through difficult times and challenges. I'm sure during COVID and just on a normal, day-to-day basis, COPE is also, as a nonprofit, dealing with challenges. Can you share some of those challenges with us and how you overcome or what type of help you need?
Thanks, Stevie, for framing that absolutely eloquently and correctly, and setting it up for how people can get involved. So we're talking today, almost 3 years to the day since the weird, strange, sad, hard, difficult COVID pandemic reared its ugly head. Loss, death, and bereavement have only spiked and increased in our communities, in our backyard on Long Island and beyond. And so the challenge for COPE and so many businesses and organizations was, how do we respond to that? So 3 years ago, again, almost to the day, we sat down and asked ourselves, how can we help families when we can't be together? And that social isolation through the physical distancing was a real question mark. We quickly pivoted, which is a word we hear again and again, even as we're coming out of these hopefully last phases of COVID, to telemental health. And so accessibility became critical for all, and families stepped up and bravely stepped into these Zoom rooms and other spaces online, and were able to maintain some semblance of togetherness, even if it was Zoom boxes instead of sitting next to each other in a community center or church or wherever our programs are happening in person. And donors really, really stepped up, and we continue to make our case of why this kind of healing and grief support work is so critical. And I can report back to both of you and your audience that over the last 3 years, the community of support, whether it's local banks and our new and historic donors who support the work that we do, have really, really stepped up their investment. And we keep being able to keep our doors open and welcome anyone and everyone who's in need of our support.
You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Adam Rabinovitch, Executive Director of COPE. My name is Donyshia Boston-Hill, along with Ray Schwetz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
24, plus years of service, a quarter century. There are a lot of accomplishments COPE has made happen. And what are the ones that really stand out to you, that the accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Yeah, well, I would begin with that fundamental fact that we're still here 24 years in and continuing to help families, continuing to sustain and grow. We all know what a challenging economy and business climate so many corporations are in. Nonprofit corporations, again, are run just like any business. We need to have sustaining resources so we can continue the work that we do. And in addition to that, we are scaling or increasing our impact, particularly in under-resourced communities. So we talked a little bit about community partnerships earlier, and I'm proud to report to both of you and to the listening audience that earlier this year we embarked on a new partnership with Malloy University, a major Long Island institution, and we are partnering with them in their community outreach work, including a community clinic that visits Hempstead, Freeport, communities across Nassau and Suffolk County on a very regular basis, providing all kinds of wraparound healthcare services to families and communities that might not otherwise have access to those services. And we have now become the go-to grief and bereavement and healing organization in that work. So that's a real proud accomplishment. And we thank Malloy University and their support, and Mother Cabrini Health Fund, for inviting us in to support underserved families across Long Island.
You touched on this briefly. We talked about, the volunteer board and other ways to be involved, but very specifically, how can one help the COPE Foundation? How do you raise funds? How can people become involved?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. So you mentioned that magic V word, volunteerism. So we have lots of ways for people to plug in, whether it's getting involved in our Camp Erin, or helping us with amplifying or building out our marketing and messaging. So everyone knows that there are grief and healing support for them, and they can reach out to COPE and others. We offer opportunities to both fundraise for and to donate to, or I should say to the organization, including some upcoming events. So again, talking about April 2023, we'll have a bowling event. We haven't had one in a few years because during COVID, who wanted to put their fingers in a bowling ball, but we'll be back to that. And that's for raising sustaining funds, particularly for our camp and retreat. And then on June 5th, 2023, we'll be at North Hills Country Club in Manhasset for our annual golf outing. So there's lots of ways to get involved through registering to golf and join us. We'll have pickleball, and folks can sponsor. All of that you can find at our website at copefoundation.org. That's copefoundation.org.
Okay, Adam, you're going to have pickleball on the tennis courts. We have to have both now.
There you go. You got it. Accessibility and inclusivity for all.
So what's next for you and your team outside of the fundraising? Like, what's your day-to-day look like as you move out of this pandemic state into just helping people through their grief, through their remorse?
Yeah, that's exactly the name of the game and the question, DB. So the fundraising for me and for us is really the means to the end. So we raise funds, and again, thanks to the generosity of so many donors and sponsors who continue to step up, we raise the money not to raise the money, but so that we can do more and more to help more and more, because demand for grief and healing services is only going up and up and up. So the three areas that we're really focused on, one I touched on, and we want and need to do more, is to support grieving families and individuals of all kinds and all backgrounds, particularly in communities that are historically under-resourced. So we'll be introducing in the near term Spanish-speaking language groups, for example. We hope to have Creole-speaking language groups as well for the Haitian and Haitian American community, and more to come. That's part of our strategic plan. A second pillar is to do more and more for families. So while we started 24 plus years ago focused on supporting parents and siblings living with the loss of a child, and that continues to be our North Star, we really want to lean into this idea that no one needs to grieve alone. So doing more for kids, doing more for families, because as we talked a little bit about earlier, a family's loss is a family's journey ahead. And then the third area is expanding and without duplicating services, being invited into other areas where we're launching some partnerships in Westchester County, north of New York City, my old stomping grounds, and beyond. So those are the three areas that are keeping us focused in terms of supporting more and more grieving individuals and families going forward.
And how can people contact you?
I invite them to connect with us through our website, which is copefoundation.org. Again, it's copefoundation.org. There's a ton of resources that people can use at their own pace about grief and healing. We have recommendations and healing tips, and then there's easy ways to get in contact, whether they're looking for support themselves or for someone that they care about, whether they want to give back in this next level of healing being helping mode through volunteering or donating. And again, it's copefoundation.org.
Adam, as we come to a close, what's the one thought you want to make sure that you leave our listener with?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. It's a short one, but an important one, which is that no one needs to grieve alone. So if you're in that part of your life, which inevitably grief touches all of us and may teach us also, but it touches all of us, just remember that you can reach out to COPE, reach out to a trusted community source, and ask for that help and ask for that support, and it'll be a valuable part of your healing journey.
That's a beautiful thought. Thank you so much, Adam. We really appreciate you being here and sharing information about COPE. And we want to leave you with DB's philosophy.
Yes, DB's philosophy. Tears water our growth. Shakespeare.
We want to thank you for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, your co-host and producers. This is an NCC Foundation production. Visit nccradio.org for more information. We're available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeartRadio as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.